Hello, welcome to Guys Like Us, the Ozzy Osbourne of 1980s of the podcast. A little crazy, a little nuts, out of control. At least that's how I like to think of us. How are you?
I'm great, but I'm afraid the only thing that's out of control is our mics and our ability to actually control them and not double record them. But I'm great. I learned a lot of new things today, which was the idea of the podcast, right? So I now know what was it, mic bleed and cross talk is.
Well, man, you've been like any good reader, which is a little bit what we're going to talk about tonight. Obsessed with a problem. It's nice to see how your brain is working in pursuit of finding a solution. I think we're all going to benefit from it.
I'm just kind of really a little bit pissed off that you buy nice equipment and it doesn't work. But then I just thought it's like when you buy yourself really nice skis, it doesn't mean that you can actually ski. So I'm feeling that we just bought ourselves okay equipment for podcasting, which doesn't mean that we know what the fuck we're doing, as we can clearly see and hear.
Well, look, I'm trying to make it up to you. So, first of all, it's nice to share a glass of wine with you. We're drinking a nice Napa Cap, right? We don't actually drink Californians too much. We're usually sticking in Europe.
Yeah, well, I never do because they're too expensive to buy and they just don't make sense value for money wise, I find, in Europe. But I'm happy to. And we're sitting here in the game room of Marc's funny building. We tried the wine room yesterday, which is like basically an echo chamber. And with both of our voices that don't seem to be very, let's say, gentle, that didn't work. So we found this space. Now we're hoping it works. And we have a great topic today, Marc. What is it?
Yeah, so we thought it'd just be kind of fun to reflect a little bit on legacy, and I think legacy is a big word. Naturally, how we think about it, and I personally have been sort of really obsessed with the topic recently. Not just because of the Great Reflection, the thing we talked, the project we talked about capturing the stories of our elders in a podcast format, but rather like personal legacy and impact, and how what we want to leave behind changes. And I think that's really interesting. And spending a little bit of time with you these days, I'm reflected just so much about your own transformation. Actually, both, I mean, as a friend, you're always great, but just of what you're prioritizing and why.
First of all, you need to hold your mic closer to your mouth, I think. And I see, because I see on the screen, whenever you talk, even in your low, sexy radio voice, that the fucking meter there goes to yellow all the time. So anyways, there's a funny story, actually, before I answer your question, which I don't get, so I'm stalling a little bit. A friend of mine once told me that he was told, I think by a therapist, he was like, you know what the trick is with women? Whatever you say, you have to say it with a sexy late night radio moderator voice, and everything is going to be okay. So you're going to say, hi, honey. Tonight, I'm going to go out with my friends. I'm going to get trashed, but I love you.
Okay. Well done. Can I elaborate on my question to you or not?
Yes, please, because I don't think it's going to come back to me. I was so focused on not fucking up the mic.
Well, you can mute your mic while I tell the story. So, dear listeners, I would like you to close your eyes and reflect 15 years ago, where I'm meeting the professor, Paul Fattinger, in business school, and a deep, I would say, career-focused trajectory, that he had at that point in time. He was like, I think he wasn't quite captain of the consulting club, though he pretty much was captain of everything, doing work sessions, really trying to bring up his skill. And I thought, okay, wow, this guy just wants to lead company, And sure enough, you did. You went from a consultant to leading a consulting group to CEO of Woom Bikes for a while. And now, you're finding yourself in a moment where that pursuit of the professional has changed its meaning somewhat, and I'm loving this moment for you because I think I'm learning a lot from it as you're processing that shift in of what matters. And I think the thing that I think is really powerful for a lot of our listeners is that you have confidence, I think, in your decision, about where you were and where you're going and what matters. And I think that's really interesting to benefit from. And I think it relates a lot to legacy.
And here is my question. That's why I don't think I got it before. Is how does it relate to legacy for you?
Well, I think a lot of people, and maybe this is the most American first insight, right? This is the like for Americans, legacy is very often their work, right? It's their job. It's what I left behind was, I was a marketing manager at, the paper company for 30 years, and then I had these kinds of customers. I mean, that to me is so connected to their time on the planet, um, that that type of obsession, um, kind of dominates, I think, so much of their ego and what matters.
I think that's the interesting one because I never thought of legacy. That's the funny thing, and I never thought of legacy as a work thing. And I almost sometimes, very often, think that I maybe think too little about legacy because okay, let's legacy and purpose to me are close, and I hope we're not just fucking with words now which are irrelated. But I often am, I'm not envious, but I'm looking up to people who have that purpose in their work, right? It's like I have to do something to change the world and so on. That's kind of like you do that, and then I guess that's legacy, right? You have a purpose. If you have that purpose, maybe that's legacy. To me, and I never thought what I'm gonna do on this planet work wise is gonna leave a legacy, or I wanted to leave a legacy, or Paul was the greatest CEO. That was something, or crying out loud, greatest consultant. Who cares, right? I never thought about this legacy as an idea really came into my life, I think, with kids, and even later, I think, with kids plus the time I had now to think about what I'm here for and what could be my legacy.
Um, okay. Well, I mean, that's kind of interesting because I think certainly in this country, you just said change the world, use those phrases, right? I mean, that's a lot of startup culture. It's a lot of tech culture here. Like I think famous example, like Elon Musk, if you talk about legacy, it's very much tied to his career and the businesses that he launched. Rupert Murdoch is in the news today and
Well,
absolutely
he
doing
also
the
has
same.
52 kids. That's also legacy.
Totally. I mean, that's I think the heart of the conversation. I always had this theory, which is a simplistic thing. I probably mentioned this on this podcast before, but you've heard my equation of money and meaning. Well, indulge. Let me indulge you for a sec.
No, I haven't, but go ahead, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I've always been fascinated that the firm I had worked for so long and helped lead, you know, it was very much focused on giving companies purpose, right? And defining their why, but really it was about giving the leaders that ran them their why, you know and I was always fascinated that they would um were always awash in money and cash, right? But they would pay us millions to give them meaning. They could never find it themselves. And uh in many ways I was in the meaning business for many years, and some leaders had it, they knew, but it was really aligning everyone around, okay, here's what we're here to do and why. And then they would take that and then he wrote books about it, they're like, okay, that's the idea I had all along, and this is what I stand for.
Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you on that legacy and companies' legacies. But on the personal front, I struggle with that topic. I think that's what I'm trying to say. I struggle with that topic, and I think, okay, I think of my dad. He built a small company that was kind of a legacy, but then in the end, also then he sold it, and it now became something else. And I think by the time he's gonna go, no one's gonna know that anymore, and no one's gonna give a shit. And I don't think he does, but by the way, right? So I'm not sure it's about things that you build unless you are like Elon Musk and build a starship that brings humanity to Mars. I mean, I don't want to, put any value on that now, but that's a big fucking change, right?
Well, I'm not sure I agree. Well, I'll speak for myself. um I definitely think it's about more things that you make and build and give away than and of course the primary legacy I think naturally people have is raising good families, right, and kids, and having that type of impact as it plays. But I often think about legacy in the end is what you're remembered for, right?
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah, what do you remember for? I thought about that. What you remembered for, but in the end is and that means how and if you touch people's lives with whatever you do, right? Isn't that the legacy then in the end? And I think we should just keep the mics on because otherwise it's a very weird
No,
conversation.
no, 100%.
Yeah.
Like, but I think it's not. But very often it helps to be working with things, intangible things or others that to be remembered for. Otherwise, it's experiences, right? And
Okay,
experiences
listen.
fade.
Let's turn this around. If God forbid I died tomorrow, what would you think was my legacy?
That is a very, very tough question. And look, obviously, three beautiful children. It's a legacy of some kind. They'll remember you, etc.
Oh, okay, sorry. What's yours?
I think it's still being written.
Well, what,
But I don't
but
look. I think that's it. Like actually, I think that's the heart of the question. I think a little bit is, I think a legacy comes at the end, right? I mean, legacy for me is when you're done with life and you leave, then when you leave the earth, that's exactly like the kind of thing you're most remembered for. That's what matters. I mean, that by me is the definition of legacy.
but is legacy highly a product of ego to still survive after you're gone because people still think of you, people still admire the things you do even if you're when you are not here anymore? Isn't that kind of like the, let's say, the external affirmation for eternity type of thing?
Totally. Look,
And if it's that, and we go back to, I mean, is that great? Do you need, who gives a, is that important? And I know it's a bit of a contrarian
no, no,
view
no,
on
no.
that, but
Actually, no. I love the push. So I think here's why it's important for me. And let me answer that. I agree with you. There's a whole argument to be made that this is really about satisfying the ego. It's about the puffery and maybe energizing yourself to fuel ambition, etc. So people can say, "Wow, look what this guy did." But for me, it's a little bit different. I think I use the idea of legacy to fuel my creative energy and that makes me want to make, you know, leaving something
hmm.
behind. And I use that as a source of energy, just more like, wouldn't it be great if my kids or my family, like, if when I get hit by a bus,
Jesus, really today? I mean, wow.
I need that kind of idea to fuel some of my art and my activities. And even like something like this, I think it's like to do this an amazing creative output. It's amazing. And at the same time, I think in the back of it is the idea that, hey, we made a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I'm not sure. It's to me, this is I don't know. Somehow, I'm now coming off like I think negative legacy is a negative thing, and because it to me had now has this touch of it's it's basically like the Putin Xi conversation that they want to change their organs and live forever, and in a negative interpretation that is also legacy, right? You want to live forever. That's why you want to create something that is still there when you're gone, kind of thing, right? And if that really is, if that's what you need to fuel your creativity, isn't it the admiration of others that actually fuels your creativity? And is that the right fuel? I'm asking myself, and I don't, and I think I know the answer to that.
Yeah, but fair. But I don't think it's the admiration of others, though maybe that's a part of it. For sure. That's part of it. If I'm honest, totally part of it. But it's more about, oh, I made something worthwhile.
And here I'm totally with you, and here I can and I 100% connect, and so I kind of think to me right now what it is like, um, I had an interesting comment in a kind of a workshop on this conference the other day, right? And it was a very interesting group that met of an entrepreneur that is now on his, I don't know, third, fourth venture, and this venture is about connecting business leaders with the topic of mindfulness in a sense, right? And
Mm,
bringing that into the conversation, but really as a forefront topic. And he brought together leaders that all were on that path, which was a beautiful thing because you saw highly successful people that were really also highly reflected and doing the work and going there. And which was, I think, also very encouraging that you can be out in this world actually kicking ass without, I always say it very bluntly, without being an asshole.
mm,
So whole story, story short, then this a woman asked this question. It's like, I'm worried that if we all turn inwards and look into being mindful and what do we want ourselves, no one is left to actually do the work to make this world a better place. I felt caught in a way because in my sabbatical in the last 11 months there was a phase where I turned inward and I very clearly said I don't give a flying f
mm.
about, and everyone, it was when Trump was elected and, obviously, then there was Gaza and all lots of terrible things happening. And then people around me were like all very much concerned by this. And I, to be honest, wasn't because I couldn't change it anyways. My concern wouldn't have done anything. I felt very egoistical about it, to be honest. But also, what came out of this phase was that what I can change and do now is my three kids and how I relate in their lives and what this is my ultimate direct impact.
Well, I see you. First, that's actually a lot of what a bit of what I wanted you to share with the audience, because I knew that about you, and I find it really interesting. Because it is a shift, and I think it's a beautiful shift, in a way. But also, I think it allows you to chase something a little bit more, right? A different type, like a different type of meaning.
Yeah, and but what I wanted to say is like, and that came, and then I focused on that, and I still am, and I still think is that I mean I wouldn't say I've done so many things wrong, but I mean, if you look from the outside, there's so many things I think I've learned quite late in my life, and I very well know that some people never do. So I'm very happy that I did. But I also think that those lessons you can learn earlier, and the reason why it took a while is because we all grew up in a certain way. All of our generation, that's the same. It's not, particularly, I think, our parents as individuals' fault. It's just the way it was, right? So we're learning things usually in our, in that mid 40s kind of midlife phase. I would love my kids to learn how to feel right now and not when they're 40 because that kind of gives
Mm.
them a gateway to better decisions earlier and so on. But but coming from that though, funnily enough, came other things like I like talking about these things, and I hear that when I talk about these things that find there is resonance, people like to listen to those stories. And that's also why we're sitting here today, because I make this podcast because, as you said, it feels meaningful and it feels authentic and it feels like what I do can have an impact on others. And I guess now we're getting closer to legacy because it's just all aligns. My passion aligns. Maybe it's Ikigai if you want, right? That concept. Great concept. We should talk about that. Do you remember what Ikigai was exactly about? I never, those three circles that align.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, it's so funny. We used it for a purpose statement. Funny enough, for a Japanese mercantile company called Mercari, but I think it's about people's. It has to do with purpose, no? Like people's reason for being, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it also is, I think, is used to find, kind of what you need to do when your own, I think, passions and talents align with what the world needs. And I think something else, and that's kind of what it is. And it's a beautiful concept.
So, okay,
It's
first
like
of all,
passion, what the world needs, and what you're good at, and in that kind of sweet spot where they align is your ikigai, and that gives you, a reason of being and getting up in the morning, basically.
let me ask you this. That's a great thing. Do you think, like, who knows? I mean, very few people, right? I think wake up, in their 20s. Just going back to this transformation, because I feel more closely connected to being clear about the legacy I want to leave behind in a weird way than I ever was. And
And what is that?
yeah, I don't know fully yet what it is, but no, but it's more like it's a lot of creative projects. I think, like, it's the storytelling project I'm doing, this podcast series. Some of these. television pieces that I'm writing and then film pieces that I'm writing, right? In addition, also to this other thing that I'm building, and I see it all connected, right? As a create, the big theme is uh, creativity through the lens of powerful stories and storytelling. That to me is it, right? And actually, I realized that what I've always loved was either helping people tell their story or telling great stories myself. And I think, and that can manifest in so many different ways, like where we are now. And
No, it's beautiful and it totally aligns with what you do and who you are. And I just had a thought, and it might be deeply too deeply philosophical and into this bottle of California Cab, but maybe legacy is more a tool to sharpen who we are here and now than an actual thing and a goal. You know what I mean? Because you
I
know
love
that
that.
famous
No,
thing.
I think that's genius. That like sit back and have a sip of wine, and because I think like
Did I have my yearly moment of genius?
well,
I missed them. I had them at work at like one bright moment a quarter, maybe. And then I was so happy.
no, I love the idea of it as a tool. That's what it is. It's just a tool to help you prioritize.
Yes, because you know that these famous things, right? Also, Stephen Covey, Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I think it's habit number 2 or 1. I don't know. The first couple, he's like, imagine this famous thing. Imagine you are at your funeral and what is being said about you, right? I mean, there's an intervention done in so many, different, bind your purpose and so on exercises, and that's legacy, right? Because what people say about you, at your funeral, that is to me the definition of legacy. But it's more a tool to find out, what you want to stand for, what you can stand for, what you have the ability for, than an actual thing. Because who gives a fuck? I'm dead. You know what I mean? Like that as an end goal doesn't do anything.
It's funny actually. In many ways, I had the answer all along. I was landing on the topic for this quick hit podcast because I was reflecting a little bit on after being in this job for 14 years, leading this company, and I was writing down lessons. One was about you know, some of them were it's about money and meaning, like one I just shared already. Another one I was like a little spin on Tolstoy. All happy companies are alike, and all unhappy ones are unhappy in their in their own way. And one of the next one was all bold moves come down to legacy. Anything bold, any move I've ever seen a business leader take, they're thinking about what are they going to say about me in the papers and my tenure when I'm done. And I often use that as a tool. Hold on, like as a tool for business decisions, right? But it's actually very much a tool for life. And if you think about it,
Oh
because
man,
I
I totally disagree. I love this. Awesome. Let's go. Yeah.
okay,
Yeah. 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 Because listen, if you think it's like, what are they going to say about me? That is totally the wrong motivation to do things or not do things.
no, hold on. Not what it's going to say about me in the papers tomorrow or the next few weeks, etc. It's more about when I retire, when I'm gone.
Bless you.
Oops, like it's the Time magazine. It's the epitaph exercise. You have 40 years on when when you've retired. You put your face
Man,
on the
okay, I don't
magazine. What do
want
they
to tell you
say?
how to do your job and basically say now that you're doing. I don't think we mean this, but I'm almost. Let me challenge this. Isn't how about if okay, if you had a leader in front of difficult decisions, and I was there plenty of times, and I'm not saying what I did or didn't do. I don't remember, but did you say, you know what? If you're now in a room and no one sees what you're doing and no one cares what you're doing, in a sense, right? Out on the outside world, the newspaper, you I don't know, and you just do what feels right. Don't you think that could almost bring out the better decision?
Oh, well, listen, I want to clarify what we're talking about. You're talking about leadership and the everyday decision making that's made. I'm talking about bold moves, real transform, like the biggest big bet rules, not like some of the stuff I know you've had to do, which is really hard, versus like, you know,
Okay, I hear you. I hear you. I gotcha. And this is actually the funny thing, right, about humanity, that a lot of our bold moves and advancements come from ego. They come from that because, and they come from, and the greatest, I wouldn't say the greatest leaders, but the greatest innovators that I know, and I personally know, they strike a very thin balance between genius and motherfucking crazy, or 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 with a bit of a Napoleon complex, as I like to say.
I mean, look at the top 5 innovators that we've had, at least in the US, right? I would say the past
Yeah, Elon for sure has a few screw loose,
Elon,
but he's like
Elon, Zuck,
genius.
Sam Altman, Steve Jobs, pick
Yeah,
another one.
yeah.
All dangerously close to, on the verge. I mean, that's well documented. But the and I don't even know how much they're too crazy, many of them, I think, to even think about legacy so much. But I actually
No,
think
I
that
think they do a lot. Well, I don't know. I don't know them. But which brings me back to, I mean, it's a great tangent because it's like, isn't then legacy a lot about ego? And do you need that actually to lead a happy life? Because do you need to innovate and do something crazy and change the world to lead a happy life? Is that the right impact? Or that's kind of what I'm trying to challenge right now because we're all trying to do
okay,
that.
then let me ask you this as a philosophical idea. Do you believe that it's a person's duty to at least attempt to realize, understand, and fulfill their potential?
Oh man, you got me on this one because right? I mean, I hate nothing more than untapped potential. And I had this episode today where my middle son, who has wanted to play on a proper football team, and he's 9 years old, forever, and we never wanted to do that because of the pain in the ass, because you go to games on the weekends, blah blah blah. So now he's played two training sessions and one match, and he had a sore ass basically. So he's been, he and he didn't want to go to training today, and it really pissed me off because it's like, that's kind of, it's untapped potential. You don't use your potential. There's resistance. You have to get over it. So I'm totally, and that's my mindset. It's also what got me where I was. Is that healthy? I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, that's
Well,
my problem.
look, I
Or
mean, it's a life philosophy. That's what it is. I think we're aligned in this. Look, life is short. You could do a lot of things with it. Look, if you gave me, if I woke up and had 100 million, and it was another podcast probably, but if a few 100 million in my bank account, would I be happy just fucking off on the beach with the boats that go?
100%.
Yeah, for some time. And then I think I'd be thinking, what else can I be doing? Like Marc with his gifts, et cetera. How can I better execute it? I don't necessarily need to be doing the hard work of rising businesses, but I would think about where I can deploy my talents in a way that's meaningful to me and useful to the world.
Yes, and I think we said it before, and I think that's kind of the the angle you wanted to take all along. Is like, we have lots of areas of our lives where we can apply our talents, and we most frequently attach it to work, and yes, and that's why we see legacy work. But to be a great father and leave behind 3 kids that are super happy, and then have maybe another six, whatever, and so on, that can also be a huge impact on the world, generationally, and not some company you're building. So I guess that's where you wanted to take me. And there's other areas like this, right? There is, can be a great friend, you can be a great uncle, wherever you are needed. And also, not everything needs. I'm against that legacy. I think I'm gonna out myself now. I think I call bullshit on legacy. I think actually that the world would be probably a better place if that concept, I know that doesn't work like this, didn't exist.
Fair. But it does, as you like to
That's
say.
fucking true.
Yeah,
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 it does.
yeah, yeah.
It does. Yeah, it
As I like to
does.
say,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
does. Fair enough. But I like the way you placed it. I really do. I mean, I think of it as a tool to help you focus on what matters and give you greater meaning versus because you can reset it all the time, Uh, and that's kind of where I led off with this conversation because
No, I'm. I mean, not telling
well, let me
you.
finish my fucking
Not
point for
telling
a
you
second
off.
and I'll tell you.
Yeah.
my invitation for you to tell your story a little bit about how things have changed, right? For me, was a shifting of priorities to what matters in a really thoughtful way, which I often thought was, whether explicit or implicit enough, was tied a bit to a legacy about how you want to be useful to the world.
Yes. I think,
Bingo.
yeah.
I landed it.
Yeah, you landed it. You did well. I just, to me, that concept just was never, is never, is where can I have impact with who I am, and what I do and what I do best.
Mm,
And if that translates to legacy, so be it.
mm.
But really, who cares?
Nice. Okay. Well, listen,
Nice one.
this is a lovely
Intense. I mean, it
conversation.
makes me think, and it also makes me think we're not done with this topic, which is fine. We can do a follow on. And we
But
didn't
it's a
do
good
any
thought
research
starter.
on this,
No,
guys.
no,
This
no.
was all
I think
totally live. That's why we fucked up Ikigai, which is sad because I read a book the other day, not too long ago. And it's a beautiful
look,
concept.
I
But you
think
can look it up. Look it up, guys. It's a great concept.
we like to synthesize at the end of our
Ah,
podcast
yes,
what these
please. Here you
messages
go.
were. But actually, I don't think there's a synthesis here. It's more of a provocation. And if you're listening and you're thinking about impact and less about what are people going to say at my funeral, but more about how can I be most useful to the world right now, as an interesting provocation, and how will that fill me up? Or let's put it this way: is my utility and my passion and my skill set and all of that, are they in line, right? And really beautifully to have great impact. And it's a beautiful idea.
And can I add to that? And I think
Please.
it is exactly what you said. And just to say it in other words to make clear, when they come from your inside and are truly yours.
Mm,
And I think to me that is important because I had the feeling that I was chasing for the largest part of my life dreams and goals and legacies, if you want, that I picked up somewhere but were not truly mine. And when you do that, you're never going to be happy.
ladies and gentlemen, it took Paul 2 glasses of wine to finally give him the line I wanted to say when we kicked this off, and I'm glad you shared that. Exactly.
And next time you tell me before.
No,
But
it's
so
it's
then it
good.
is.
This is an
That's what it
organic
is.
insight.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. And that's why I think I'm so, this legacy topic just kind of rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because it has that external kind of filter thing, right? What
Yes.
do other people say about you after you're dead? So, no, what do you feel right now that you love to do, that you want to contribute, that you want to spend your time with, and it's truly yours and not someone else's expectation
Mm,
or someone else's whatever
mm.
you saw somewhere. And that's what it is. And if you do that, you're gonna have legacy, all right. But who
Yeah.
cares, right?
It's a lot like how people who've made it really well, especially entrepreneurs, they said, "Look, chasing the money, the wrong thing. Chase the passion, bring it to life. You're taken care of."
Yeah,
It's a similar principle.
it's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Oh man,
So it was
thank you
fun.
for driving us there. Right. Do you? I mean, do you have any Terminators or idiots of the day? We gotta say it today.
Jesus. Well, I think my wife, Vera, terminated some chicken today. That was amazing. That was really good.
Oh, it was amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
I
By the way,
always suck at doing chicken at home. I'm inspired now again.
like, you know what, guys, it's inspired. She did a good job. It's the cafe, I think it's Zuni Cafe in San Francisco. They do this legendary chicken where you dry it in the fridge, you stuff it with herbs, and then you roast it. And it was a great testament to it. And if you're ever on in San Francisco, I think it's still open on Market Street. It's a great bird to have and indulge in. What about you?
I think my Terminator of the week is the day was when we rode the bikes to your office through basically what is it Soho basically and the West Village. There was this guy on his bike, right? His e-bike, and with his kid on the back seat, which is not an e-bike, it's a fucking e-moped, which is not allowed in Europe, but you have to see in the US, an e-bike is a bike that has pedals, but you don't have to use the pedals. Actually, it's
So
just
is that.
there for a joke. Yeah, well, in Austria and Europe, that doesn't work like this. You actually have to pedal. So I thought I was a pretty cool dude with his little kid there with a helmet going around.
Yeah.
And in general, I like all the biking in New York is Terminator style, man.
It's
I've
awesome.
said this before. It's awesome. It's
Yeah.
awesome. The infrastructure is awesome.
Yeah.
The bike paths are actually better and better.
Yeah.
I don't know why you go on the sidewalk all the time. never done this in my life.
Oh,
And I've
because
also
because you know I need
no,
extra adrenaline. I'm a
yeah,
junkie.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
It's
Look,
totally
it's
useless.
like you want to get
But
nuts? Let's
no,
get
no,
fucking
no,
nuts.
exactly, exactly. It's like really, really, and I am not shy when it comes to no, you're turned off, man.
Oh, I just want to show the Austrian I got balls. Sorry, that's why I
So
want to
so
say the
that
repeat.
that was my Terminator. This whole biking in New York City is my Terminator.
Okay, well, my idiot's probably the same as your idiot, which is that guy in the that Lambo, um, like detailed SUV. What's it called again?
Urus,
It was Urus.
Lamborghini
Oh my!
Urus.
First of all, I have about 6 of those in my building. Don't ask why. And this one was like lime green. It was like about to turn into a transformer. Just like a kid's car, basically. Right? It was what those things cost $250,000. I mean,
Yeah,
talk.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then you put a mirroring foil on it. It's insane.
it's an
But on the other hand, it's almost like if you can do that, you really don't give a shit,
yeah.
right? Or you do, and you're really off.
Maybe he's a
Anyways,
Terminator.
I don't. So my idiot of like the thing that really annoyed me today, and it's hard to give if it's a physical. How would you say? Yeah, a concept that exists in physics like echo and the idiot of the week. But I hate echo because because I spend a lot of time today figuring out how to avoid mic bleed and crosstalk, which is very hard if you have a partner in crime whose voice is so beautiful that it transcends all how do every wavelength whatever and crawls into my mic. But that's my edit of the week. It really pisses me off, and it gives me a lot of appreciation for the people who actually have figured out how that works.
Well, on that note, thank you, Paul,
Thank you, Mark.
and look forward to see you next time on Guys
Same
Like
here.
Us.
See ya. Bye.